Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Some of you guys, I'm all bright and cheery because I was the nerd who didn't go to the party last night. Did you go to the party? Was it awesome? Yeah, you can tell me about it later and then make me feel bad for not going. But I feel awesome. So my name's Elayne Duff, and welcome to Tales Mexico and Beer Cocktails. Thank you so much for getting up so early in the morning. Some of you may know me, some of you may not, but my former life, I was the head mixologist for Diageo, one of the largest spirits company in the world, in the United States. And about 9 months ago, I got lured over to the beer world, which has been amazing, because you know what's great about beer? All you need to make it cold. And you don't have to worry about garnishes or juice or any of that stuff, so it's perfect just the way it is. Of course, the right beer. But of course, I like to make my life difficult, and I love to explore beer cocktails. So I'm really been enjoying, and I also get to work with any brand I want, but of course, not in beer world, because we have some amazing brands here. But before I talk about myself, I also just want to say thank you to our sponsor, which is Goose Island Beers. Woo! They have kindly put together those brochures in front of all of you that have beer cocktails. All the ones that we're serving here today are in there, plus about 5 other ones that you guys can then take back to your bar and recreate there, and all the great information about their beers that are available here in Mexico and in many parts of Latin America. But enough about me and our sponsor. I want to introduce our esteemed panel. So next to me, I think a woman who needs no introduction, Miss Lynnette Marrero. Many of you ladies who might be very aware, she's the co-founder of Speed Rack, an awesome competition just for women in the industry, as well as being an award winner bartender, as consultant, and an expert on beer cocktails. In the last 3 years, she's been working on a great program and a great beer bar. So she's going to be talking about that later on, like the ins and outs. If it's a beer bar that only serves beer and they want to serve cocktails, there's definitely pros and cons to that. And then how to make the best beer cocktail you possibly can. Then next to her is a man also who needs so much, Mr. Leo Robitschek, who you might have seen present yesterday, presenting his amazing bar, the Nomad. When I met Leo, he was at 11 Madison Park, and believe it or not, he was studying to be a doctor. And I remember having conversations with him when he told me he had to make a hard decision between becoming a doctor or pursuing his career in the bar industry.
Poisoning people.
Yeah, poisoning people. So thankfully for us, Leo chose the bar industry and has gone on to create award-winning programs, 11 Madison Park, as well as the incredible Nomad. So thank you, Leo, for being here. And next to Leo is a man who many of you may have drank at his bar, Ricardo Nava. He is he's also in the spirit industry, the winner of World Class here in Mexico in 2012, which is no easy feat, as well as being the head bartender at Limator. How many of you have been to Limator? Yeah, so have I. It's awesome there. So thank you so much, Ricardo, for coming on. And he's going to talk about all the things going on here in Mexico. So, Ricardo, you're going to start us off by talking about, the current Mexico trend, because beer cocktails is a typical way beers are actually drank here.
Okay.
But there are good ones and bad ones, Ricardo. Take us through them.
Good ones.
Yeah, the good ones first.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who is here. It's a pleasure for every one of us being here. I guess I'm going to speak Spanish. That's so much better for almost everyone here.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to interrupt you. So for all of you who have your so the translation is going to go in both ways, in English. If he's speaking Spanish, it's going to go in English for those of you who don't speak Spanish. So I need a translator because I won't know what he's saying. And then when we're speaking English, obviously it's going to be spoken to you in Spanish. So if you have any issues, just always raise your hand, and one of these great guys, the caps, we need one over there? Okay, great. Sorry, Ricardo, thank you. All I'm the only non-Spanish speaking person here on my panel, so thank you for allowing me to be here. Everybody good? I think we have one more back there. All right, Ricardo.
¿Ok? Bueno, en México, como todos ustedes conocen y saben, tenemos una tendencia muy fuerte con las micheladas, que es una bebida preparada a base de cerveza, limón y sal. Es una bebida que surge a mediados del siglo XX en México en un club deportivo, pero esa es una manera muy usual de tomar la cerveza, solamente la cerveza de producción nacional. Cuando hablamos de cerveza artesanal, no recomendamos hacerlo mediante las micheladas porque los sabores tan peculiares que tiene cada una de las cervezas artesanales con las que trabajamos detrás de las barras, no podríamos resaltar sus sabores o sus notas de cata utilizando solamente limón y sal. Después, como ustedes pueden ver, hay una tendencia muy fuerte también, bueno, más que nada fue hace 2 años, de las birritas o margaritas con la cerveza dentro de la bebida. En lo particular se me hace un poco antihigiénico, ya que muchas veces no sabemos dónde estuvo esa cerveza almacenada y metiendo todo el cuello de la botella en la cerveza no es lo más recomendable. Otra de las tendencias muy fuertes en México que va creciendo y tomando mucha fuerza es tomar nuestro vaso de tequila, mezcal, con un chaser de cerveza. Todos conocemos lo que es el chaser, que es un vaso con soda. En este caso, utilizar una cerveza como acompañamiento va tomando mucha fuerza, pero en México solamente lo conocemos con tequila y mezcal. Más adelante vamos a ver otras opciones de hacer ese maridaje. Luego tenemos las famosas micheladas con clamato, que son estas micheladas preparadas con limón, sal. Nuestra famosa salsa para micheladas, en México le llamamos petróleo o veneno, que más adelante la vamos a ver, y partes iguales de clamato y cerveza. En México amamos el picante, nos encanta el vivir enchilados y nos encanta estar todo el tiempo sintiéndonos mal después de comer. Por eso es la razón en la cual, si ustedes ven la foto de la esquina superior derecha, es una bebida que por sí el líquido pica y aparte tiene un rim de chile en polvo, lo cual lo hace todavía más picante. Y por último, esa no es tendencia, pero es algo que sí pasa en México, sobre todo cuando ustedes van a mercados o tianguis callejeros. Son las famosas gomichelas, que son hechas con lo mismo que la michelada cubana, clamato, y gummy bears, gomas de... ¿Ok?
Is that even good?
No. Gomichela. Pero es muy común como en ese sector social, donde están los mercados, los tianguis, y la gente le encanta ponerle a veces pepino, apio, aquí en México lo llamamos cueritos, que es de skin pork, chicharrón, yeah. Eso pasa en México, pero eso en realidad es como una tendencia que tiene mucha fuerza, en los bares es de lo que más se toma. Si ustedes entran a cualquier barra, en un bar o restaurante en México, encontrarán que siempre tienen a su lado una botella o un tanque de 1 litro donde almacenan el veneno o el petróleo, esta salsa para micheladas. Se vende bastante.
So would you recommend that bottom cocktail into the, for your craft cocktail bar?
No. The last one, no.
Just
¿Cuál?
checking.
¿La gomichela? No, la gomichela no la encuentran en bares de coctelería. ¿Ok? Después tenemos el esquema o la preparación de las micheladas en México. La michelada tradicional, que es la primera que se conoció, lleva cerveza, jugo de limón, escarchado el vaso con sal y salsas picantes. No, esa no lleva salsa. No, la michelada tradicional solo es cerveza, limón y escarchado con sal y hielo. Posteriormente tenemos la michelada cubana, que es la que nosotros conocemos más picante, que lleva también escarchado el vaso con sal, limón, hielo, pero después tenemos nuestra salsa de micheladas, nuestro veneno, nuestro petróleo, que es 50% de la salsa inglesa o Worcestershire, 40% del sazonador jugo Maggi, que es solamente para el color, 10% de la parte picante entre salsa tabasco, sal y pimienta. Uno de los errores que más comete la gente a la hora de preparar esta salsa para las micheladas es agregarle jugo de limón dentro de este mix, porque el jugo de limón termina oxidando nuestra mezcla y puede echarse a perder a lo largo del turno. Sin embargo, si nosotros solamente tenemos las puras salsas dentro de la preparación, nos puede durar hasta una semana en refrigeración, ya que todos son sazonadores que tienen bastantes conservadores y tienen sal y ayudan a conservarse unos a otros. Otro de los errores que hemos visto que la gente comete a la hora de preparar este petróleo o esta salsa es añadir más sabores o más salsas, más picantes y hacer más compleja la estandarización de este tipo de salsas. Mucha gente agrega chile en polvo, chile piquín, agrega también otro tipo de salsas como salsa valentina o salsa cholula, lo cual eleva los niveles de acidez y hace variaciones muy fuertes a la hora de prepararlos cada vez detrás de nuestras barras. En México, creo que así como en muchas partes de Latinoamérica, una de las tendencias más fuertes en los sabores a la hora de preparar cócteles es el exceso de dulce, el exceso de sabores dulces, empalagosos, cremosos. Entonces, en México, al menos hablando ahorita de lo que es la zona de México, las tendencias de sabor siempre han sido dulces. He ahí la razón por la cual México es uno de los principales consumidores de Coca-Cola a nivel mundial, uno de los países con mayor nivel de diabetes, gente con diabetes. Después tenemos que la gente también adora los sabores salados, todo lo que es salado, dulce y picante. En México la gente le gusta, por eso también México es uno de los países con mayor índice de hipertensión arterial. Entonces, ahora hay una tendencia muy fuerte en la cual es cuidarnos a la hora de tomar, ¿no? Como le llamamos el mindful drinking. Si de por sí sabemos que a la hora de tomar mucha gente cree que se está haciendo, no es sano para nosotros, pues hay que tratar de tomarlo de manera más sana. ¿De qué forma? Bajando los niveles de azúcares, bajando los niveles de sal, bajando los niveles de acidez, o quizás haciendo más bien, no, los niveles de acidez sí debemos de incrementarlos, y debemos de tratar de hacer bebidas ABV, que en ese caso, con bajo contenido alcohólico, en ese caso las cervezas ayudan bastante para hacer ese tipo de bebidas. ¿Cómo podemos nosotros hacer que la gente que está acostumbrada ya a los sabores tradicionales en nuestra cultura, en nuestras tierras donde trabajamos, cómo podemos hacer que ellos se acerquen a sabores más clásicos como el Negroni, el Manhattan, todo este tipo de cócteles que nos cuesta mucho trabajo vender en las barras en Latinoamérica? Creemos que la mejor manera es buscando llevar estos sabores que para muchos son desconocidos a través de sabores ya previamente conocidos o familiarizados con ellos. De una manera que a nosotros nos ha funcionado mucho en Limantur, no sé si conocen el cóctel Rosita, que es una variante del Negroni con tequila. Lo que hacemos nosotros es agregar un poco de jugo de piña y unas notas de jarabe canela y angostura bitters para que pueda la gente tener como esa sensación de un sabor conocido, que es un sabor dulce, frutal y fresco, pero con las notas amargas que debe tener un Rosita. Las notas del Campari se perciben muy bien y poco a poco la gente va adaptándose a este tipo de sabores. Empiezan con este cóctel que se llama Tahona Punch y más adelante la gente va pidiendo un Negroni, un Rosita y así se van adaptando a esos tipos de sabores que son desconocidos para mucha gente todavía.
The cocktail we have. So, no, Ricardo, when you tell us about the cocktail we have.
Ahora estamos tomando el IPA Whiskey Mule, que es un cóctel que creamos pensando en que la gente ni siquiera muchas veces conoce los clásicos, como es un Moscow Mule. Nosotros los conocemos porque a esto nos dedicamos, pero si ustedes se lo tratan de vender a los invitados en su bar, la mayoría de ellos no tiene conocimiento de lo que es el Moscow Mule. Entonces, la manera más fácil de empezar a desarrollar cócteles es partiendo de un clásico ya establecido. Así nosotros sabemos sobre qué límites podemos jugar. Y aquí tenemos una mezcla de bourbon con jugo de limón, jarabe de miel con jengibre, aromático de angostura para lograr redondear todos los sabores y un top de IPA Goose Island. ¿Ok? Cheers. Cheers. Salud, chicos.
Cheers, everybody.
Ricardo,
Can you tell, since the Moscow Mule, I have to take that off. It's weird having somebody speak Spanish in your head.
Happens all the time.
So how many of you are familiar with the Moscow Mule? Have you had one? Yeah. In the States, I mean, it is probably the #1 selling vodka cocktail on the menu at the moment. It kind of took the Cosmopolitan off the menu, and now you see it everywhere because it is so simple. It's just vodka, lime juice, and ginger beer. And for me, depending on the ginger beer, a little hint of simple syrup. So as Ricardo said, one of the easiest ways to start working with beer cocktails is starting with classic cocktails. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later when Leo talks about the potato head method. Mr. Potato, how do you replace like for like? But it is, so it's finding the beer, finding the recipe. And one of the ways, if you want to make a real low alcoholic cocktail, is actually to take out the bourbon. And instead of ginger beer, we're adding ginger syrup, just lime juice, Angostura bitter, just to give it that little bit of bitterness, and just some a Goose IPA. And then you have a low ABV cocktail that is bright and citrusy and effervescent and very easy to drink. Thank you, Ricardo. So, but Ricardo, we also talked about there's some difficulties when using, these new style of beers that are coming into your marketplace. So, can you talk about them?
Ok, solo para terminar un poco el IPA Mule, en Latinoamérica es difícil encontrar ginger beer, muy difícil que en los mercados encontremos ginger beer. Entonces, una manera de empezar a utilizar las cervezas es convirtiendo hacer variantes del Moscow Mule con diferentes cervezas artesanales. Hablando acerca de las dificultades de hacer cócteles con cerveza, lo primero con lo que nos encontramos fue de qué manera podemos nosotros reutilizar una botella que abrimos para hacer solamente un cóctel. Si consideramos que para hacer un IPA Mule necesitamos aplicar un top de cerveza, por consiguiente nos queda una cerveza a la cual puede ser que se pierda ese mismo turno si nadie más pide el mismo cóctel. Entonces, ¿de qué manera podemos preservar o conservar esas botellas ya abiertas? Una opción es, como platicábamos con Lynnette, si nosotros absorbemos dentro de ese cóctel absorbemos el costo de la botella completa, lo mejor que podemos hacer, y una muestra de hospitalidad muy clara, sería darle lo que queda de la cerveza, dárselo al invitado y que siga completando su cóctel en la mesa o que la pruebe aparte. Porque muchas veces quizás es el primer contacto que tiene el invitado con esa cerveza artesanal y de qué manera la va a probar, mediante un cóctel. Pero si la prueba aparte por separado, también se va familiarizando y es muy seguro que siga tomando o el mismo cóctel o siga tomando la misma cerveza. Además, el invitado se va a sentir halagado y se va a sentir especial de que le estemos dando lo que sobró, ¿no? O sea, aunque se escuche mal, pero lo que quedó o el restante, eso hace que el invitado se sienta especial dentro de nuestro bar. Otra opción es taparlas con los tapones para vino, pero, Lynnette, aquí, ¿cuánto tiempo puede durar una cerveza?
It really just keeps it for one shift, or so if you open it and it's a 12-ounce bottle, so you need to know that if you're depending on how much beer you're putting in the drink, you're either putting in, if it's a drink that's 3 ounces, you're getting 4 serves out of that drink. So you have to keep mindful of that. And also, if you have 2 stations in a bar, you kind of really want to make sure that, kind of like many things, if you're sharing the draft in the middle, that any of those used bottles are being shared between the bartenders, so that way you don't end up at the end of the night like we all have in many bars with like 7 open bottles of Coca-Cola that are now a waste and a cost, which is really important when you're thinking about your bottom line for your cocktails and how that builds in, and your bar managers want to know those costs. So just being mindful of that serve. I personally recommend that it's just better to give them the beer, and clearly that works here. I mean, I enjoy getting my michelada and having the rest of that beer to keep topping off, but then you need to make sure that the base that you're putting in the glass has enough flavor that it can handle adding more beer to it. So you want to have more of a concentrated base in that glass. So one of the drinks that I've done is using a watermelon flavored beer with a concentration of hibiscus or Jamaica syrup with blanco tequila, and it's kind of like a margarita, but as they add the beer, which already has flavor, it's contributing to that cocktail. So with the lime juice and everything, it just keeps adding flavor. So yes, it will change over time, but it's still a complete cocktail at the end of the day because they are getting to pour that can into the glass.
Thank you, Lynnette. And actually, Leah? Yeah.
Oh, fun. Hola, ¿cómo están? Para confundir a todo el mundo, voy a hablar en español y después en inglés, ¿no? Voy a hablar en inglés porque soy de Venezuela, pero no sé por qué mis padres no me enseñaron el vocabulario oficial de mixología a los 5 años cuando voy a los Estados Unidos. So for English now. No, I agree with both these guys. I'm very OCD and crazy, so I like all of the cocktails to be perfect every single time. And what Lynnette said in giving them beer and increasing sort of that flavor profile so the cocktail can change is really important because I do like seeing development of a cocktail. But I also, as a bar owner, manager, I like to save money. So something that I do is I always try to think about what can I repurpose. So if I have leftover beer at the end of the night, obviously there's a few choices. One of them is to be very hospitable and give it to a guest. The other one is I can drink it. But the third is what can I do with beer? And we'll talk about this later. But I look at that as an opportunity to create a different cocktail. So what am I going to do with this syrup? I'm sorry, with this beer? Maybe I'm going to make it into a syrup, which we will discuss later. But yeah, for me, it's all about repurposing. But as Ricardo mentioned, you should be costing out your cocktails, and you should be incrementing the cost of that beer within the cocktail, so it is not just official waste.
Thank you. What do you guys think?
And the
of
shelf
the,
side is up beer.
Exactly. What do you guys think of the Mule, the whiskey Mule? Good? I think it's pretty good. Is that a resounding yes? All right, I'm going to take it as yeah. There you go. Ooh, there you go. That was Ricardo. Thank you. All right, so we're also now going to talk about, I know our second drink has come out, and we're going to talk about what that is in a minute. U.S. trends, so what's going on, and this is what's going on in Mexico, but there's also, obviously, there's a huge trend happening in the USA and beyond. Now, for those of you who travel to the United States, you'll notice there is craft beer exploding. The craft beer movement started in the 1980s with Anchorstein Brewers out of San Francisco, and there's now over 4,000 breweries, craft breweries in the United States alone, and there's actually room for 30,000 of them. So the craft beer, you can ignore it, but it's coming. Okay, so it is already here. So brands like Goose Island, they started, actually John Hall, he was the founder of our company. He was inspired, he was actually bored. He was in the United States, and the only thing he was getting down was watered down lagers. And he wanted something with more flavor. So he kept traveling to England, and he really enjoyed their ale. He loved the flavor, he loved the complexity of it. So he came back to Chicago, and in 1988, he opened up a brew pub, and his first beer he made was Honker's Ale, pretty much styled after an English-style ale. So from there, it became so popular because other people were also bored of just drinking watered-down beers that they started expanding their line. And next thing, they started creating an IPA, they started creating a wheat beer, so they then eventually expanded into becoming their own brewery. So now, those beers are around the United States, and now they're actually here in Mexico. So you're going to be tasting a lot of them over the course of the day. And the reason I'm talking about this is because, obviously, your customer base is not used to drinking craft beers. They don't drink IPAs, they don't drink stouts, they don't drink, this is not normal or common. I'm sure for all of you here who are bartenders, you drink differently. Who drinks just straight up booze? Shots of beer, yeah, Negronis, right? We drink differently than our customers. So, but your customer, as Ricardo said, likes sweeter drinks or spicier drinks. So the craft beer, in order to introduce it to them slowly, is by using beer cocktails. And this is a great way of introducing your clients into this new trend. So one of the things we're going to talk about is there's different styles of beer cocktails. So we just talked about one, which is the prepared beer cocktails. And also, I want to give credit to the person who came up with this philosophy, which is Jacob Greer. If you have not gotten his book, it's called Cocktails on Tap. It's a whole book about beer cocktails. It's really well written. I highly recommend it. It's on Kindle as well as hardcover. But he breaks things down into different styles of beer cocktails. So you have your prepared beer cocktails, which is a beer in a shot, a Boilermaker, or a Michelada, right? And then we have beer-topped cocktails. Now, the cocktail you have right now, I'm going to let Leo talk about, but basically beer-topped cocktails tend to be beer that is mixed with other spirits, juices, and syrups Traditionally, a lot of times when I make these, I will add all of those ingredients into the shaker with ice. I will shake all those ingredients, strain them into my glass, and then I top off the drink with beer. Okay, that's my traditional technique. That being said, not everybody has the same technique, and there's different ways of doing this. So I'm going to let Leo kind of talk about the drink you have in front of you, and then also his technique for making this cocktail.
Sure. So what you have in front of you is called fresa y cerveza. I am horrible at naming drinks, so the two main ingredients, fresa, strawberry, and cerveza. No, so this cocktail actually came from, again, me trying to save cost and hating waste. Our kitchen was making a strawberry salad, and in that strawberry salad, part of the preparation was to pickle strawberries. And when I was sitting and tasting with them, I started tasting the pickling liquid, and it was absolutely delicious. And basically, it's just a byproduct. It's vinegar, so just we use white balsamic, sugar, salt, water, and then you bring it up to a boil, add it to strawberries to quickly pickle them.
And this recipe is in your booklet, just so you know.
Yeah.
The pickling liquid he's talking about is actually in the booklet you have. So.
And no, it's okay. And when I tasted it, I was like, this is absolutely delicious. It's so shameful that we're throwing it away. I need to make something with this. And when I tasted it, shrubs are a thing that are very big in the States right now. And it's, used to be a way of preserving fruits with either just adding sugar or with adding vinegars. And it's something that's also really good to drink on its own as a non-alcoholic beverage. But in tasting this, my mind just went right off the bat to beer. And I was like, I would love to have this with a high-acid beer. The Sophie is a fantastic beer that's complex, but it does have a little bit higher acidity compared to some of the other beers. And the flavors, are a little more light and mellow, and they go really well with the strawberries. So I just combined a little cucumber, just to add some freshness, yellow chartreuse, lemon, and then some spice. So we infused jalapeno into agave and made an agave syrup, and then topped it off with the Sophie. Now, as we talked about, Elayne was talking about technique of making beer cocktails. And the reality is, there's so many different ways to make beer cocktails. I'm not saying that anyone is right or wrong. All we can do is tell you how I make beer cocktails, because all I can teach you to do is what I do, and not to say that it's right at all. But again, I'm really OCD and crazy, so I like to measure everything out. And the issue with, for me, shaking a cocktail, pouring it in a glass over ice, and topping with beer, is that the size of your ice is going to be different all the time, and the volume is going to be different. So that means the amount of beer that you put in the cocktail, if you just top, is going to be different. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is the ice is going to sort of break the fall for the beer, and it's going to sort of separate. So you're going to have to mix it, and when you do that, you're just going to lose a little bit of effervescence. So what I do is I measure out the beer. I use a jigger, and obviously it takes a little bit longer because there's a head, so you have to pour slowly, and I measure out the beer within the glass, and then I shake the cocktail and pour it inside. That process of pouring it into the beer already starts mixing it, and then I just give it a light little swirl, and then I add the ice to it, which is very different than when I make regular cocktails. But just doing that, it already helps mix the flavors together. It helps it to be a more homogeneous drink, but it also helps it to be a balanced and consistent drink. And then what I do is add ice afterwards. So that's just my technique. You don't have to use it. It's not what I use for every beer cocktail, but it's the one I use for here.
It's really good. I said bullshit, it's really good.
So this is fresa and cerveza. I hope you like it.
It's really good.
Also, thank you to the
Salud.
cocktail apprentices for making all of our drinks today and making
Yes,
us a
exactly.
good.
Thank you, Hop Team. Awesome job.
But Leo brings up a really good point, as we kind of touched on for a minute. Some of the trends in the U.S., especially right now, are this kind of daytime, all-day drinking, the aperitif, and having cocktails like these that, we're having them right now in the morning, and none of us they don't feel very heavy. They're very light and refreshing. They have cues of, which are great for food pairing as well. So when you're talking about the salad that he was having, having this with that salad, for someone who's eating very lightly, having a light cocktail is better than having having a really heavy drink. And so keeping that in mind, that we also had the conversation, certain things don't pair very well with either wine or necessarily a cocktail. So a beer cocktail can be a kind of nice middle point for you when you're thinking of pairing to complement. So beer cocktails have that great way of giving you more flavors to play with.
Absolutely. So the next style is also beer incorporated cocktails. So one of the drinks, and I had to test this out for myself, which was the Mai Tai IPA, which is a drink out of Jacob's book. And the one thing, because Lynnette and I discovered, and also Ricardo, because I said, actually, this is a beer incorporated cocktail, meaning you actually use the beer like any other ingredient. So it's usually only 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces of beer, maybe up to 3 ounces max. But the beer is mixed in with the ingredients just like the rum or the citrus. So I said, there's no way you should shake a beer cocktail thinking it would explode, and it doesn't. I was very happy to find this out. So was my family for not ruining my kitchen. So I started testing it out, and basically this is a beer. We actually incorporate the beer into the cocktail, and the reason why you shake it, when you shake a cocktail, a lot of times you take away the carbonation, and it's not as effervescent. But for the Mai Tai, the reason for adding it into the drink was to add the bitter flavors to balance out some of the sweeter flavors and the flavor of the rum, to add some creaminess, and also some foam. So it really just added a little bit of a tiny bit of effervescence, a little bit of bitterness, and a little bit of like texture to the drink itself. And by shaking it, so a beer incorporated cocktails, you're actually adding it in, you're adding all the other ingredients, you're actually putting the ice in, you're shaking it like you would any other drink, and then straining it over ice. And it works extremely well. I actually tried just topping it off, and it didn't work as well because the beer was on top, the drink's on the bottom. So this literally becomes an ingredient within the drink itself. Emma? No?
Well, I will say go to that. I mean, she's very right. There are some cocktails, especially like the Mai Tai IPA. It's a lot of letters in a name. But that when you incorporate the beer and you shake it, it's not going to explode. But there are some other beers that might be a little bit higher in carbonation, or if you do use a bigger amount of beer, and it's not that it's going to explode, but the pressure is going to build up, and you are going to lose that seal a bit quicker. And I found that out also the hard way, not knowing what I was doing a long time ago, probably not knowing what I'm doing now, but trying to use a Hefeweizen in a cocktail, and that did not end up really good.
So yeah, it's definitely depending on the style of beer and also how much beer. I don't recommend anything above 3 ounces. I don't think I recommend shaking. I think that's going to be a sticky mess. So another great way of using cocktail is also something called a beer flip. Now, probably not as common here in Mexico, but in the States, this is actually an old style drink. We used to drink this, our forefathers used to drink this because beer wasn't very good. Beer, before they actually learned how to make beer, it was more like, gristle, it was more like oatmeal with some carbonation and some, alcohol in it. But as beer got better, they started drinking it cleaner, but they still like to add some, rum to it, or maybe even heat it up, so that way it was a hot drink and kind of cool, warm you down after being outside in the cold. But I know, Lynnette, you used them at the hop.
Yeah, so the program that I did is it was a beer-only bar that expanded, and they brought in spirits, but to keep the mindset of what their customer was coming in for, which is their range of beers. So it was looking at different styles of beer and how you incorporate them. Hudson Valley, New York can get very cold, so this is kind of, as Elayne said, a way to incorporate styles of beer that, with the stouts, not as much carbonation, so they're going to integrate really well into cocktails a little bit better in some ways. They can take a little bit of heat because they react better. They've got more natural sugars, so it's going to react better to a little bit of heat applied. But even as a cold drink, these still have a heaviness and a creaminess and something that you would think of it more like custard. So probably here for a warm weather environment, you could still serve these maybe in a smaller portion as kind of like a dessert drink, because they really are really pleasant for the palate, can go really well with richer, creamier dishes if you want to have that kind of similar thing, but then they can add, the stout adds a bit of that you get a lot of lighterness to that heavy thing as opposed to adding cream, but you get that mouthfeel, which is really nice. So you're getting a lighter version of a creamy style drink. But as you think of things and flavors that go with these, you're thinking about your nutmegs, your cinnamons, and spirits that also tend to have like flavors of those things as well. So here it's the Averna, which has very much the Amaros have those dark flavors, have those spices and spice notes. But if you change up that particular ingredient, you can add whiskey or rum or things that already have, again, the wood finishing is going to bring out the notes of vanilla and a few other things that are very complementary to those dark brown flavors. But that, you can also play around here again with flavored beer as well if you want to play with like more of this kind of heavier idea. In the U.S., we get in the fall, we always get lots of pumpkin stouts and beers that heavily have flavors from the agriculture that is happening. So you can do that to have something a little more seasonal for your menu. So it's really tasting those, and they're all so different. Some people in stouts bring out way more chocolate. With the Bourbon County Stout, because it has the whiskey, you're getting more of those notes that you get in a whiskey. So when you taste it, you want to pair the whiskey you're putting in it, maybe pair it better so that they bring out complements in each other.
Has anybody ever had a Bourbon County Stout in Goose Island? A pleasure? Yeah, it's a good beer. It's almost criminal to mix it, but it actually does make a really, really good flip drink. So another thing is, and a very common drink is beer punches. So beer punch has been around for a very long time. If you haven't never picked up the book, David Wondrich's book about punch is fantastic. It really does break down the history of punch and all the different recipes and how you can use it. It's one of the oldest styles of cocktails out there. Beer works really well in punch because beer adds, it brings down the alcoholic proof. So a lot of times you add water or tea to punch. If you come to my house, be warned of the punch. My husband makes a really, really strong punch. I think he likes to get all my mom friends drunk and see what they say because they're not used to cocktails. So beer is a great way to adding flavor, adding a little bit of carbonation, adding a little bit of the beautiful flavors, and also just a way of stretching out the drink in a low alcoholic way. This is an ale punch. This is actually from Jacob Greer's book as well. So this is, it's a very classic, this is a literally historic drink that's been around since the colonial days of America. He actually then worked with David Wondrich to come up with what Capillare would be. Am I saying that correctly? So it's a fantastic way, but beer is really great, and punch is great to serve in your bar, because we've been doing it in the States as a trend, people having bowls of punch in their back bar, as guests come into your account, and they're all looking at the cocktail menu. It's a great way, they don't know what to drink. It's like, hey, would you like a glass of punch? And before you know it, in 20 minutes, you've made, $50. Sorry, I don't know what that translation is in pesos. And before they've even ordered their first drink, because it's a pre-batch cocktail, which is fantastic. And beer is a great way of working with that drink.
One quick thing on beer punch. I actually love using beer punch as well for a few reasons, but one of them is if you do water, punches tend to fall, obviously they're a little richer in the beginning, but as they sit, they tend to fall a little flat for me. And what I love about using beer is that effervescence and that sort of creaminess that you get when you add it to it still keeps that cocktail alive for a bit longer. So I really enjoy using that in lieu of just water. It works very similar to champagne in that way, but I feel like beer gives it that extra something and gives it more texture, which is something that I like in cocktails that you usually lack in punch.
Lynnette, do you have any beer punches on your?
I don't, like in the traditional sense, have beer punches. I think it depends. This is another service issue. So how you're going to serve your punches is really important. In the bar where we did the beer program, it still is heavily, sales are skewed towards people drinking from the draft. So the cocktail station is is smaller. So you have to be more sensitive to the ingredients we're using that are not going to sit out for a long time. So the beer punch for us doesn't quite make sense, but we do a lot of drinks that incorporate beer into them as service, and more sours and collards as opposed to punch.
And this also might be a great way for the leftovers. So if you open up, I don't know if Ricardo, like if you have leftover, when you open up that bottle, like you might have punch, beer to be used within the punch. Ricardo, do you ever make any punch at the limit?
Sí, en Limantur tenemos ponches, pero creo que algo que funciona mucho en Latinoamérica y creo que en todas partes del mundo es a la gente le gusta que lo vean y lo distingan. Entonces, el tener lo que hemos hecho en Imantur es tener una ponchera más pequeña y mandar el ponche para todos los invitados que están en la misma mesa. Entonces, eso funciona muy bien porque puedes utilizar la botella completa, haces el ponche para 6 personas y la gente se entretiene sirviendo ellos mismos el ponche en su propia mesa, les gusta verse diferentes y saben que aquí en México la opción de compartir es así, es de muy buen gusto para la gente.
Fantastic. All right, fantastic. So, a very traditional style of cocktail that you will see in the States as well as in Europe is the beer mimosa, as well as when I was starting to do research. So, the traditional way is actually using a wheat beer and fresh squeezed orange juice. But another drink that is extremely popular, especially in Germany, in France, and as well as in England, and now in the States as well. I've learned when I was doing my research that I thought these were 3 different drinks: the Shandy, the Radler, and the Panache. It's all the same drink, just called differently in different countries. So the Shandy is the Shandy in England. It's the Radler if you are in Germany, and it's the Panache if you are in France. So they're all the same drink. Basically, typically using a lighter style beer like a wheat beer or blonde ale, and mixing lemon lime soda into the cocktail. But I know Lynnette we tend to do it a little bit differently. Like the lemon lime soda is the simple version, which is 7-Up for those, or Sprite. So yeah, or Squirt. If you're in Mexico. So, but I know there's another way you can take it up one more notch.
Well, clearly, since we're cocktail nerds, we want to give the freshest ingredients. So for us to control the sweetness, to control the product, it's using the fresh citrus instead. And then there's classically two different styles of shandies. So these were drinks that were enjoyed pre-prohibition, so it's not surprising that they carried through. As the pub developed into a place that had a gun, it was easier to press, Sprite and throw that in the beer. But in old style pubs, this would have been created at the time with, squeezing the lemon in, having sugar syrup, topping it with the beer. And as Elayne said, this was to cover up, like many things in Prohibition, the bad taste of the ingredients, so you added things to make it taste better. As we've moved further, there's the Shandy, which is just the citrus, adding it to the beer, probably for some nutritional value, I'm sure, at the point. But then there's the spirited Shandies, where you, if you're going to add alcohol to that, you're going to reduce the amount of volume of the sweet and the sour, and then add your spirit to it, and then have the more spirited Shandy. But in a lot of ways, thinking like a French 75, how you wouldn't be putting like a big 2 ounce of that spirit necessarily. You'd probably put something lower because your beer is also going to have alcohol content. So constantly being reminded of maybe a shorter spirit pour, because you're going to add that with the alcohol from the beer.
So the drink you're having in front of me, a great example of a style of this is, and something you guys are probably very familiar, is Sangria. So this is a beer. This is a beer cocktail. You're adding non-alcoholic ingredients. So we're kind of doing a twist on some of the cocktails we just mentioned. So the drink you have, does everybody have one? Sophie Sangria?
It's delicious.
Isn't it nice? So this was actually created here by my team here in Mexico. So well done, Jams. Basically it's just, as you can see, agave nectar, lime juice, orange marmalade, and Goose Island Sophie. And some of you who might not be familiar with Goose Island, the Sophie. Sophie is a Belgium-style ale. So if you would go to Belgium, which is the land of beer, they would have something called Farmhouse Ales. And Farmhouse Ales were literally the farmer would, he would mill his fields, he would get all the grain in, he would sell what he could sell, and whatever he had left over, he would turn into beer. So the fermentation, they would use their farmhouse. They would have the fermentation barrels outside in the warehouse. They would open up the doors for the barns. They would allow all the yeast, which in the barn house would settle into that beer, the fermentation. Anything that the wind brought in would then settle into that beer. And they would, create a very rugged style of a farmhouse ale. Now, many times, obviously, you would think that doesn't sound so good, right? Lots of things are flying in and landing on this beer, so sometimes it would be a really nice fermentation and a great beer would be formed, but also, again, a lot of times it would not, so they would add fruits to it, like strawberries and oranges and other things to kind of balance out the flavors. So Sophie is not made in Belgium, it's actually made in Chicago. It's inspired by Farmhouse Ale. It uses 2 different types of yeast. So it is a yeast. Who likes champagne? I like champagne. So for those of you who like champagne, you would really love this beer because it has very light effervescence notes. It has very nice creamy vanilla notes. But it's also, part of it is barrel aged in wine barrels with orange citrus zest. So it's going to have beautiful, really beautiful citrus notes. So it is an incredible beer to drink on its own. For those of you who eat ceviche or nice fish, it's amazing because that effervescence kind of takes the fattiness of the fish off your tongue. It's just beautiful. It's my favorite beer, but it also makes delicious cocktails. So how many, what do you think? Sangria? Yeah, it's good. This is a really simple and easy cocktail that all of you can make in your bars or at home. Now, another big style that's happening and trend that's happening in the States are the artisanal uses for beer. So as we talked about, like beer sometimes can get wasted because you open it up. So what do you do with that beer if you're not giving it to your customer? And as Leo said, you're worried about your costs. So these are some ways, and I'll let Lynnette, because I know you've done this a few times.
So again, when we talked about earlier, the challenges of creating a menu for beer and beer cocktails is to go with something that's familiar. So if you want your clientele to understand the drinks, it's using those beer ingredients in traditional, familiar ways. So one of the ways is using in a stout syrup to replace your sweet element in a drink that's really popular and getting a lot of popularity in the U.S.
By the way, it's supposed to be 0.5 ounces, not 5 ounces.
0.5, half ounce.
0.5, not 5 ounces. So sorry about that. Typo on my end.
But when you're working with the stouts specifically, when you reduce them again, all those sugars are concentrating all those flavors. So what happens is they also can get a little bit bitter. So you have to add back a little bit of sweetness. A lot of us have gone back and forth. Sometimes you add a little bit of the fresh beer back into that syrup once you've reduced it to get some of that lighter flavor again, and then some sweetener. I like to use molasses because, again, it stays in that dark range, and then it brings another sense of tartness to it, and you get just more unique flavors. But you could also just add brown sugar back in, so it really depends on the beer, again, that you're tasting, what it needs for you to add it back to bring it to that where you want your sugars are for then the cocktail, because you don't want to add more sugar. You want that syrup to be that part for you. Leah's worked with it.
And this is definitely something you want to pay attention to. I've ruined 2 pots so far trying to make beer syrup, so definitely something you want to pay attention to.
Yeah, I guess I would say one other small thing. Like Lynnette said, my use sort of beer into a syrup was in exploration of trying to figure out what to do with leftover beer. And you have to pay a lot of attention, like Elayne said, because for me, I have to stir it quite a bit because there is a bit of effervescence. And if you just let it sit, sometimes it'll boil over and it'll make a disaster. But you stir it because you want to remove most of that effervescence. But for me, I use a little item called the refractometer, which measures sugar density. And that's because when you're cooking something down, you never quite know how much you're reducing it. So when you're adding sugar back into it, just for it to be consistent, I always sort of measure that out. But you can do whatever you
If
want.
you work in a hotel, like the Nomad, you can get all the front toys you like.
They're actually they're not that expensive. They're like $100 American, and they're great.
I know, I'm just teasing me.
Okay, sorry.
It's because he saved the beer.
So, yeah, it's because I saved the beer. I was able to buy a refractometer.
Exactly, that is very good.
So if you don't drink beer for like 2 weeks, you can buy a refractometer.
Fair enough. So another interesting way of doing, I actually had a very fun experience. I was in, everybody heard the bar, the White Lion?
Yeah.
It's won lots of awards. It's a very interesting concept because there's no back bar, all the drinks are bottled. So he only has 1 beer on the menu, and this is how it's described. So you get a craft lager, it is canned 2 ways, so you can just get the beer, or if you'd like some IPA, like you'd like some hoppiness, they then bring an atomizer, with a, what would you describe what's in the atomizer? Distillate, a hop distillate. So then you get your beer, and then he just sprays the hop distillate onto your beer. So I just thought it'd be fun to share. It was a way, if you want to get your customer into drinking hoppier beers, maybe start them off with a hop distillate, give them a craft lager, give it a little spray, see what they think. Exactly. But, or just buy an IPA and call it a day, especially Goose Island. But it was an interesting way of using beer, or some of the elements of beer, in a more artisanal way. And one of my favorite bars in New York is called the Porch Site, and they have an incredible beer program as well as a great cocktail program. And he wanted to create something really, so he makes a drink called the IPA Amazing. And what he does, he actually makes an IPA, a beer foam. So he creates his drink. So there's no beer in there's a beer syrup. So kind of like the syrup we talked about, but actually I think he makes it with a lighter syrup, like more of a lager syrup. And then he actually uses not an atomizer, a CO2 canister, where he actually then creates a beer foam and he puts it on top of the cocktail. So when you're drinking it, you're getting all the bitterness and aroma of an IPA, like grapefruit and guava, things of that nature. And then you're drinking the drink. The drink kind of comes through the foam, so you're getting all those flavors together. So it's just an interesting way of using your beer. All right, so we talked about a lot of things like, different styles of cocktails, different things you can do with cocktails. Now we're going to talk about what beer brings, why we love beer so much. So there's, this was actually very handy. I actually found this on the internet because I was trying to like how do I explain all the beer flavors? And beer is extremely complex. It's probably one of the most complex things that we drink. There are over 62 different styles of beer, and each one of those beers brings its own unique texture, aroma, and flavor and complexity. So if you're looking to bring some sweet, like you have a sweet palate, or some great beers to work with, or something but more malt, like a porter or a stout, they're going to bring more of those graham crackers and that chocolate and those vanilla notes to a cocktail. But if you want something that's maybe more on the spicier note, and it's not like hardcore spice like jalapeno, it's more like herbaceous spice, you're going to use something with more yeast, like a wheat beer or a hefeweizen or a sour beer. And they're going to bring notes of like fruit and spice, like banana and clove. And then you have more of the bitter elements. So if you want to bring more bitter to your cocktail, beers that have, more licorice or citrus are more hoppy beers, kind of like an IPA or a pale ale. So this is just kind of like a chart, like if you're trying to navigate like what I want to bring to the cocktail and what flavor agent I'm looking for. This is a great map to start out with. But some of the other great attributes that beer brings, it brings so much to the drink. You have from carbonation to acidity to complexity, meaning all the different flavors that goes in the beer, to what Lynnette was talking about with the seasonal flavors, to aroma. Different beers use different types of hops that all bring different flavors and aroma to the drink itself. Now, one of my favorite drinks, we had this the other night at dinner at a place called Scotch, is using just a very simple drink. Has anybody here ever had an Aperol Spritz? Right? It's a very big, trendy cocktail. I know it's not as big, Ricardo, right? It's not as big here. Is it big here? Yeah? Yeah, it is. The Aperol Spritz is here as well. So a way to incorporate your clientele into drinking beer, especially a hoppy beer like an IPA, might be mixing with something a little bit sweeter, but also has a bitter element. So Aperol is that gateway. So it's a very, very simple drink. And again, the beer is bringing carbonation. So instead of using club soda, you're using an IPA beer. And it's bringing complexity. So it's just a very simple drink, and it's in your booklets out there as well. And this is one where you actually want to stir the drink. You would not shake it because I want to keep all the carbonation within the drink itself. Do you guys have any drinks like as simple as that on the menu? Do you have any two beer drinks or no? No? Okay, just checking. Fine. Now the other thing is that beer brings to it is also acidity, especially sour beers. Anybody here had a sour beer? I love sour beers.
Two hands up for sour.
2 hands up, sour beers. It's one of my favorite things to drink. And unfortunately, the Goose Island Jillian, which I mentioned here, is not here. A lot of the sour beers that Goose Island creates, they are barrel aged sometimes from 12 months to almost to like 16 months in a barrel with different styles of fruit. They're very limited in production, so they don't actually make it out of the States. But the reason I brought this example is that you can actually use beer to bring the citrus notes to balance out your cocktail. So literally, this is just a Tom Collins, a very simple drink. But what I did was just add gin, the simple syrup, and I just used the Jillian, which is a sour beer that is barrel aged with strawberries and honey and a little bit of white pepper. But it has enough acidity that you get all those acid notes that you need, but it also has carbonation and then extra flavors on top. So a very simple way of incorporating a delicious beer into a great cocktail.
And just on that note too, sour beers have a huge resurgence in the U.S. And actually, Elayne was doing some research in Denver, and I sent her to a place that actually is using a lot of wild yeast. So in the same way that we appreciate yeast and how it affects, spirits, the way you treat the yeast when you're making the sours beers is so important because that's really imparting that flavor. And so when you taste sours side by side, like even the range between the Lolita to the Jillian, they're so different side by side, but they're a great trend. Some of them can be a little bit lower proof, but they're really bringing a broader audience into the beer world in general. I personally am very sensitive to hops, so for me, I can't really do the double IPAs and the things that are super heavy because my palate tends to be very sensitive. But the sours are something for me that are very cleansing and fresh and goes so well with a meal, and I'm very into it. But it brings a broader audience into the beer world.
Absolutely, you can make them on your own. They're fantastic with food.
They said on the road, I was like, okay.
Yeah, not the road. I'm sorry. Did I say on the road?
No, you said it right.
Okay, just checking. So seasonality. Beer can also bring seasonality to your menu. Now I know in Mexico the weather kind of stays very similar to the same, but if you want to bring, when the season changes. In New York, obviously we got the 4 seasons, but I know I've been here. It's always weird when I see Christmas trees in warm environments. But when you want to bring that, the winter environment to your into your bar. Beer is a great way of doing that. It's a great way of bringing seasonality, and that's when you bring your heavier beers or your more flavorful beers like the pumpkin ales or watermelon ales or things of that nature. Do you ever Ricardo, do you ever use any like flips or any of those heavier style beers?
In Mexico, it's very, very difficult to use flips because people is afraid to taste cocktails made with egg. Even the people is scared about trying sours with white egg white. They are really, really scared about the flavors and they guess this is like too much protein and very heavy cocktail for them. So the flip is so much difficult.
So what do you feel of eggs? We know that eggs in cocktails, you can tell, right, Leo? Like it's definitely not something you need to be afraid of. You don't need to be afraid of using egg. Once you put the alcohol in there, it kills any of the germs that you might think of. So it's not something to be afraid of, but it is a great way. This is just one way of bringing seasonality to your bar, but another great way is a drink that Lynnette made, bringing more of a summer feel and bringing some of that season, when the spring or summer comes in and, you think about fresh peaches and you bring about mint.
So one of the main flavors that I get from hops and certain styles of hops is a little bit of a peach. So when you taste it, like that's a natural flavor to me. So I wanted to make a cocktail that was all beer, something to have on the patio, because the hop is opening a patio, but we're in a town where people drive, so we want a lighter cocktail that wasn't super boozy, and using the pesh just kind of highlighted the beer flavors, and then the mint integrates really nicely, so you could have this long drink that is slowly, over the crushed ice, is getting the dilution that way. And you can either do the mint leaves fresh, or you can, and mail them in the bottle of the tin, or you can have a syrup. So either way that makes more sense for your bar. For execution, you can do it either way, but it just ends up being this really nice light flavor and brings out all those things you love about the South, like peaches and beer, and that bitterness from the IPA also makes you think spirit. So it's just a really nice way to have a beer only cocktail.
No, absolutely, and I definitely recommend when you're making it, menu, changing with the seasons, even though your seasons don't change, but that people know when summer has come, because obviously it does get warmer or cooler here. When Christmas is coming, so this is a great way of just having different things on your menu that kind of lets people know that the season has changed, and kind of welcoming people into the year. So now we're going to talk a little bit about basic, like how do you make a beer cocktail, like starting from the very basic. We talked about many different things, different styles, different ways you can make it, different trends. But now, just like any great cocktail that you're making, I always believe you have to start with the basics. So the drink that you're getting right now is something you might be familiar with. It's a beer and a shot. Or a Boilermaker, but it's only a Boilermaker when you actually drop it into the actual drink itself. I do not do that. We're going to drink it because what I really believe in is that, and as everybody up here believes in, is that when you're starting, you need some place to start, right? You need a starting place. There's 62 different styles of beers. There's numerous types of styles of alcohol. There's, white, tequila. There's aged tequila. There's white rum, aged rum, different things. And it can get very overwhelming as a mixologist to start, where do I start? So where I like to start is always at the foundation. So I know, hey, I want to make an IPA drink. So what spirits go really well with IPA? Or I want to make something with a pale ale. What spirits? Now this rule also applies when you're actually having a beer and shot. Now this isn't a perfect science. This is like my own, I actually went to a seminar in Berlin where the guy was doing a whole seminar about beer and Boilermakers and what went best with what. Then I started doing this in my own house. But I'll be honest with you, when you line up 1 beer and 8 spirits, it gets a little loopy after a while. But this is my way of I found that these pairings worked really well. But the basic, I think we can all agree upon, lighter style beers, lighter style spirits, heavier style beers, heavier style spirits. So it's kind of like common sense. It's not much rocket science, but this is just a nice place to start, right? You need a starting place. So, is everybody good? I know people are taking pictures. So the Boilermaker is also something that is becoming very trendy in the United States and also around the world. You're starting to see Boilermaker menus. So this is a great way to encourage your consumer, instead of just ordering a beer, to then get a spirit on the side. Now this is something a lot of us in the industry do already. And Ricardo, you said this is something, can you tell us a little bit in Mexico, what's the trend for a beer and a shot?
Yes, in Mexico, the people really loves to drink tequila with beer beside. So for the mezcal, it's the same trend, but actually we are trying to do the pairing of beers with Scotch whiskey, bourbons, liqueurs, amaros, and vermouths. And one of the most unusual trend is the Negroni with a beer beside, because you could perceive the flavors, the bitterness flavors of different beers, like Sophie beside a Negroni.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a perfect beer. So very recommended.
Yeah, and it's a great way. It's just an extra addition. It doesn't, on your menu, just have this as like a trend, because maybe they don't want a cocktail, but they really, they do want something a little bit harder, and they do want a spirit, and to have a guide for them, so they're like, I really want my favorite craft beer. And say you're just a hardcore craft cocktail market and you don't carry a lot of beer. This is a great way. I'm just going to carry a few beers, and I'm going to pair it with some of the spirits that I have on my back menu.
Yep. Quickly on Boilermakers, the first time I sort of saw a Boilermaker menu, I'm like, well, that's a stupid waste of paper. You have your spirits listed and you have your beer listed, and then I thought about it, and it's totally not, because thinking about cost or thinking about making money, if somebody sees 2 separate things together, they usually tend to order it a bit more. But also, if we think about just flavors, we're supposed to be the experts technically, or a guest or not, they're there to enjoy an experience. So somebody ordering a whiskey and somebody ordering a beer that doesn't go well with it, or a tequila and a beer, and they start drinking these things side by side, both of them are not going to taste very good. That person, even though they think they're having a good time, is generally not going to have as good of a time. Like, I don't know, this beer isn't that great, this whiskey's not that good, oh, this bar's not that great. So doing something like this, it's awesome because you're giving them guidance. You're B, hopefully selling more money, and C, you're giving them a better experience because you're like, hey, this beer goes really well with this, and they drink it together, and even if they're not thinking about it, one makes the other taste better, which in essence makes them have a better time. They're like, wow, this bar is awesome. The beer tastes so good here, and so does the whiskey. I don't know why.
So I have not been back in Mexico City since 2002, so this is the first time I've been here in a very long time, but at least what I didn't realize was the first cocktail I was introduced here was what we call now the Trinity. My husband's name is Ty, but the Trinity, and we have it at Maya all the time. It's tequila, sangrita, cerveza, repite, and it's really a smart thing about it because you're deconstructing all those flavors. So you're having, that wonderful tequila, and then the sangrita tends to be really a house recipe, so you're tasting that, and it brings out different flavors in the tequila. And then you're having the beer palate cleanse, and then you keep going, and that pairing, rather than having it all mixed together, is a much more enjoyable way to enjoy all three elements of that trio. And if you really customize them, it's also more popular now to have your different sangritas that can go in different ways. And I don't know if that's really happens here as much, but in the U.S. at least, that's how we've adopted that culture to having different styles of your sangritas to pair with your mezcals or with your tequilas and then the beer that you have.
Absolutely.
And I also like to call the Boilermaker the gateway cocktail drug for beer cocktails. I think a lot of times people see a beer cocktail and they get scared off the bat because they've never had it and they're like, oh, I don't want that. This beer was made to be delicious on its own. I don't want to mix it with anything. And I think showing a Boilermaker and showing how the two flavors can complement each other will allow people to have a little more faith in you and allow them to trust you a little bit more so that maybe they will order a prepared beer cocktail or a different cocktail. And especially in an emerging market where cocktails aren't as big of a thing. Like every single person in Mexico doesn't drink cocktails, just like every single person in America doesn't drink cocktails. But as part of our community, we're trying to get people to enjoy cocktails more. And I think this is a really good introduction to it. So when they can see how flavors combine together, they might be more inclined to taste something different.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that, so we're going to actually drink this. So this is, I like to call the perfect pair. And I was actually introduced this, again, as I said, I was doing lots of research of which spirit went well with each beer. And I was going to my favorite Mexican restaurant near my house. And they introduced me into this amazing mezcal, which is Siete Misterios. And they gave me this orange slice with the, the chili powder on top. And I found out, and they happen to have Goose IPA on tap, which was fantastic. So I said, let's see how this works together. And I've now tested this in actually Belgium, which is the land of beer. And I got a lot of Belgians drinking mezcal, which was weird for them, and beer, and American beer, and they love this. So the way this works, as I'm sure you guys have done this a million times, we're all going to bite into our orange, and then we're going to take a sip. You don't need to shoot it down. You can if you want, but just take a sip of your mezcal, and then take a sip of your Goose Island IPA. You ready?
I'll have another.
I don't know about you, but I think that's awesome. It's like you get the citrus, you get the bitterness, and they kind of, all the different flavors kind of really complement each other. Unfortunately, I still have orange rind in my mouth, though. What do you think? I got thumbs up in the back. I'll take that as a yes. Yeah, that was good. So this is a great way. I thought it'd be a great way. IPA is not very an easy drink for somebody who's already been drinking lager, but since beer and shots are a big part of drinking culture, it's a great way to introduce them to Goose IPA. So for those of you, I know I talked a little bit, I won't talk too much more about Goose, but this is, so Goose IPA was one of the second or third beers that John Hall created. It has won over 6 awards at the Great American Beer Festival. What I like about it, as Lynnette said, she doesn't like overly hopped beers. This is not an overly hopped IPA. It's perfectly balanced, has lots of citrus notes to it, just enough hops to give the bitter notes to it, but tons of aroma. If you're going to start drinking IPA, this is a great one to start with. And as you can tell, it works really well with mezcal and oranges. So put that on your menu tomorrow. right, so I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I want Leo, because I wanted to explain to them about, and that might be a funny, but Leo said that he has a technique, when he's starting to put together cocktails, he calls the potato head, Mr. Potato Head technique. And he said he was given a challenge once to make, 10 beer cocktails for a party?
So, you guys are probably way better at making cocktails than I am, but about 8-9 years ago, we were doing the closing party for Craft Beer Week in New York City, and the people that were throwing the event said, hey, we want you to make cocktails for the party. I think it'll be really cool. My initial reaction was, oh, why would I make beer cocktails 9 years ago? And at that point, honestly, the only beer cocktails I'd had was one that a gentleman over there in the corner that's hiding named Daragon served me at a place called Please Don't Tell. That was a black fork that was delicious.
Mr. Mayor.
And I've had Shandy's and Boilermakers and micheladas, and I was like, oh my God, I have to make 10 beer cocktails. And I was like, no way, I don't want to insult these people, like, and bastardize their beer. But then I was like, hold on, these people are asking me to make cocktails with their beer. I'm like, why am I so upset by this? And I was like, oh, it's because I don't know how to make beer cocktails. And I'm putting myself in a position that I'm uncomfortable. So in trying to make beer cocktails, I was trying to use beer as I used any other ingredient, and I was failing miserably. And I was like, wow, I'm really awful at making cocktails. And we have this theory in New York that a lot of us call the Mr. Potato Head technique. And I started breaking down beer to realize what is it really. And we've sort of mentioned this in the past, beer can be used as a modifier. Beer can be used as a base spirit. Beer can be used as a lengthener, something like to make a highball. Beer can be used as a sweetener. Beer can be used as a bittering agent. And if you think about cocktails, technically there's 5 ingredients that go into cocktails. There's the spirit, the sweet, the spice, the citrus, and then the dilution. And so if you think about Mr. Potato Head, he has a few slots, right? There's the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears. So if you think spirits are the nose, or the mouth, or whatever, the sweetness is the eyes, spice might be the mouth, acidity might be the ears. And in making a cocktail, you're like, all right, I can make a sour, and I'm going to make it with gin. Oh, wait, I'm going to change Mr. Potato Head's nose and make it with rum, and it still works out. But then if you think about it, you're like, okay, I'm going to use beer now. Where does that fall into? And we said it could fall into any of those. So beer to me is more like a Darth Vader mask. It fits every single hole and goes on completely. So you think about it, and you need to modify accordingly. So if you're making a cocktail with beer, you think about the beer first and foremost, and you're like, what does this beer tell me? So if you're using an IPA, you know it's going to add some acidity. It's going to add a little bit of alcohol level. It's going to add a lot of bitterness. If you're using a sour, it's going to add more acidity than anything else. If you're using a porter, it's going to add spice notes. It's going to add sugar. So for me, when I'm making beer cocktails, you need to break it down beforehand and think about what is this beer going to do, and then what are the other flavors going to do to the beer in order to make this balanced. So this first cocktail that we had, we're using something that has more, the second, we're using something that has more acidity and some spice notes. So I know that the other flavors need to be more enhanced. I know the sugar level needs to be way more enhanced. I know the bitterness in here needs to be way more enhanced because when I pour in something with more acidity, it's going to be unbalanced if I use the same ratio that I normally would use. So that's why, for me, it was more and more about thinking about what flavors are going to be incorporated into this beer and what flavors we want to get from the cocktail, and almost drastically enhancing those to balance it out. So yeah, that's a Mr. Potato Head technique over there.
I like
I'm
it.
sorry if that's even more confusing, because I realize I probably confused everyone, but.
But it's the same way of tasting. It's the same way of tasting spirits, right? So, one mezcal versus another mezcal, and even tequila is going to have different flavor components, and then it's balancing them out. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And then knowing how you're going to use them, if you're going to use them in a syrup or in a beer shrub or in any other way, then how those flavors are going to be intensified. So then, it is a good practice to taste all those ingredients. I think sometimes we take beer for granted. Here, especially even you have a lot of lagers, but each one of those lagers have a different flavor. And so you might pair a different one with your michelada than another place, and that's going to change the flavor of that michelada. So, we are naturally doing it, but we just need to be more conscious of tasting them and trying to write notes about our beer in general.
Absolutely. Ricardo, you got something?
Yes, in the Mantur, we are always trying to get the well-balanced cocktails. And for the well-balanced cocktails, you need to perceive and feel every ingredient of the cocktail. If the Tom Collins needs to taste like gin, lemon, syrup, and bubbles of soda, you need to perceive every ingredient. That's
Absolutely, that's a simple way of saying what Leo said.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I just went. The other way I sort of like describing beer, and it's the simplest way that I describe it to my bartenders, is beer is a more complicated champagne. And if there's any sommeliers out there, you're going to probably hit me. But no, so think about how you use champagne in cocktails. And it's a very similar way to how you can use beer in cocktails, except now you're adding even more flavors. So it's all about, again, trying to think about what you want, what flavor profile you want, and adjusting the other things accordingly. So to try to clarify, Mr. Potato, if you're making a sour, and you're just doing a whiskey sour, and you're using just regular sugar, the ratio is going to be normal. But now you use honey. Honey is sweeter than regular sugar, so you're probably going to have to up the acidity or bring down the honey, so you have to modify those ratios. And that's, I just say, look at beer in that way, and think about that beer and what it tastes like, and modify everything else accordingly.
Thank you, Leo.
Yeah.
Much more clear.
Shut up now.
We only have 10 more minutes, I think, or 8 minutes. So different beer cocktail techniques. Some of them, these are pretty just, things you would think of anyway, but one of the major things is making sure your beer is cold. Don't pour warm beer on top of your cocktail. It's going to foam too much, and also that person is going to be drinking is a warm beer, especially if you're just doing a beer top cocktail. So this is common sense, but it needs to be said because I've had warm topped beer cocktails and they've shaken them, and it just brought down the temperature of the rest of the cocktail itself. So make sure your beer is chilled. If you want to get texture and you want some foam on top of your drink, the technique you should use is shaking your drink. But again, as we talked about before, nothing more than 3 ounces, because above that you might experience some unpleasantness or a mess. Carbonation. A great way of getting carbonation is topping off your drink, or as Leo does, he puts his beer in first, and you're going to slowly stir. Am I getting that correct? Slowly stir your ingredients. Yeah. And then this is an interesting one. So do you want to use, now I know bottle is more prominent here. In the States, cans are really big. Beer cans are like really cool for the hipsters. Anything that makes you look like, I don't know, beer, I don't know why it's popular, but it is. Bottle versus draft. So what is your favorite, bottle versus draft?
Again, it's volume size too, so I like cans in some instances because I can chill them faster. They're going to stay colder, but again, you can't recap a can, so that's where you really have to work with the sidecar element and serve it with the drink. And then bottle, you can recap it with that same capper. If you're sensitive to how you open it, you can put the metal right back on. That works best for beers that already have like a little bit of a lower carbonation, and ciders and things like that, that the flavor will stay, but it's not so much about the carbonation, it's about the flavor. And then, I guess I kind of fall on both. I don't particularly use draft, even though drafts are very popular, and some people we were talking about really like to use the draft. Joshua, who was bartending last night, as Elayne said, likes to use the draft because then the beer goes down the bottom of the glass and almost activates and almost stirs itself. Then we talked about Mule and kind of does the Alex Day method, which is where you take the carbonated element, put it in the shaker, and then serve it, so that way it's mixing as you're pouring it. So there's no right way. It's really whatever is going to work well for your environment.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously draft is the most affordable out of the options, and you have the least amount of waste. But I don't know about Mexico, but our biggest issue at the Nomad is your draft lines. We get them clean and maintained all the time, but it's really hard to keep it consistent. So one thing that I see people do is that they'll pour out a cocktail, they'll pour it in a cup, and then they'll go get to the draft and they'll pour it in, and they never really measure that amount that they're getting. And it's really hard to, because you're going to get different amounts of head depending on the cocktail, depending on your draft system. So just visually, it's hard to measure. So if you are using draft and you have bottles or cans, what I do, and again, not the only way to do it, is I pour it into a pitcher first or a cup first, and then I let that settle, and then I pour that in. But like Lynnette said, I much rather use a can or a bottle, only because I know it's going to be more consistent all the time than a draft is going to be. And as we already discussed, I'm crazy, and I'm a little OCD, so I need that consistency.
You're just crazy good.
Oh.
Ricardo?
The draft is the best option for Latin markets, I guess, because the cost is always the cheapest, and this is more consistent, like as Leo said. But if you need to open a bottle, this is also a good option. But I guess the second bullet is where the open bottles become.
Yeah, and I know Elayne talked a bit about temperature, and I think what a lot of people don't realize about temperature as well is that temperature is an important factor in flavor. So if you think about drinking a hot cocktail versus a cold cocktail versus a room temperature cocktail, you're going to get a lot stronger alcohol flavors when it's hot, and you're going to get more muted flavors when it's cold, and the sugar content is going to come out more when it's hot as well. So for me, it's really important that we always maintain the same temperature for using the bottle or the can. So it doesn't matter what temperature it is, like I know Elayne said to use only cold. If you're going to use a warm beer, totally fine, but make your drink spec with a warm beer.
Yeah.
Balance that cocktail with a warm beer, and then you could always use a warm beer. If you're going to make your drink spec with a cold beer, then always use a cold beer. Where it becomes inconsistent is when a bartender leaves out that can and you made this drink with a cold beer, and then now it's a warm beer and they add it in, it's going to taste different, and your guests are going to be confused, and they're going to think that you're incompetent at your job.
Absolutely. Now, you had an interesting theory about the ice, about adding ice before or after in your...
Oh yeah, no, again, you can do whatever you want. I was just saying, we normally add ice first, but in a beer cocktail, because of the measurement and because of the way that we like to mix it, we add ice after. Or as Elayne said, you could actually add the beer to the shaker and then pour from there, because it helps mix it better. Because if not, if you see the ice, especially the bigger cubes of ice like you use in Mexico, you guys have way better ice than we do in the States, by the way.
Nice and nice.
It's going to break that fall with force when it hits the liquid. It's going to be a lot slower, so it's going to separate. So if you see a lot of beer cocktails, you're going to see it's a different color in the bottom and on the top. So that alone is telling you that it's not well incorporated. And if you're making a cocktail and you want it to taste the same all the time, I would either pour it into the shaker, like I should call the Alex Day method, or I wouldn't add the ice first. I would put both of the ingredients into the glass, and then that pressure from pouring both is going to mix it a little, and then give it a stir, and then add the ice. Again, you lose a little carbonation, but it's a more homogeneous, better drink for me.
Absolutely. And is there a theory about like mix first, or I think you touched upon it, like mix first or beer first?
Yeah, I mean, again, the only thing that I can say to that is be consistent. So do it the same way every single time. Whichever way you want to do it is the right way for you, but just make sure you do it right the same way every single time so you can have a consistent outcome. Because honestly, again, if one of your bartenders is pouring ice, the mixer, and then the beer, and the other one is doing the Alex Day method, and then the other one is doing the method where they pour the ice last, that cocktail is going to taste completely different every single time, and your guests are going to think that you guys don't know what you're doing.
Awesome. Ricardo, good. Okay. So the last thing I think we're going to touch about is glassware, right? Yeah. So not using the same, I know we are used to drinking, a beer out of a pint glass, but it is actually, if you're just drinking beer on its own, the glassware really matters. You'll notice that different brands have different styles of glass because they've actually built that glass specifically for that style of beer. But the same thing goes true to cocktails. You're not going to serve a martini in a pint glass. Well, you may, but it probably won't be a good martini. So the same thing goes true with beer cocktails. You don't want to automatically just go to the pint glass. You want to think about different styles of glassware that work well for your beer. So if there's more beer, obviously you're going to have a taller style of glass, but you don't want to make the beer cocktail like every other cocktail, like every other beer. You want to make it special, just like you would for your cocktail menu. Any thoughts? Just specific glass?
No, I mean, I guess it's a bit of common sense. It's the same thing with mezcal. Like, if you pour mezcal in a copita versus un vaso pequeñito versus un vaso así, like, it's going to taste different if it's the same mezcal. So, again, to me, I don't care what glass you pour it in, as long as you're consistent, and that's the way you build it out.
Absolutely.
Again, I think the moral story is I don't care what you do, as long as you do it the same way every single time.
Absolutely. So I think we have like 2 minutes for questions, maybe? Okay, we seem to have time for questions because we're kind of kind of wrapping things up. We talk about it on the menu, but we don't have time for that at the moment. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Anybody have any questions for the panel? Absolutely. Leo?
I look at beer cocktails the same way as I look at every cocktail. I cost out every individual ingredient on its own based on the amount they're using. So yes, you're right, sours are way more expensive than a lot of other beers because they're artisanal and harder to get and you usually don't get them in draft. But you're not using a full bottle of a beer in a cocktail either. So yes, there's two ways of costing. You cost that out and you say, hey, I'm using 30 mLs, or do you guys use ounces or milliliters here?
Milliliters, ounces?
Whatever, 30 mLs or an ounce. Either way, you cost it out, you break it down, and you see how much it is. Or you can look at it the other way and you say, hey, I might not be able to sell this beer again. I might not sell another one of these beer cocktails because sadly, beer cocktails are not the best sellers. They might sell better in Mexico than they do at home, but they're not the best sellers. So you might say, okay, I'm going to make this cocktail more expensive because I am going to use all 8 ounces because I'm going to have this loss. But it's looking at your bar and seeing what you do with costing, and we could do a whole separate seminar on costing. I could talk an hour and a half about costing, but or I could talk to you afterwards. But
also, one of the things I've seen done really well in a lot of great bars is that if you do have that one cocktail, like you have a reserve menu, like a reserve drink menu, it could be one of those drinks that, like, you know, you have the house special cocktails that every bar should have. That's higher price. Like, you know, everything else is 10. But that one drink or 2 or 3 drinks, because that's your house special drink, are $15. And it makes everything else, A, look cheaper, and 2, as we say in America, there's always the asshole with the black card who wants a $15 cocktail, right? Right? So it's a great way of pricing it onto your menu and building it in. Any other questions? No? In the back?
Sorry. I find my beer syrups don't have a very long shelf life. After 3 or 4 days, they start to ferment. Is there anything
louder,
you can do?
actually?
So the shelf life of beer syrup.
Of a beer syrup, a lot of them only last 2 or 3 days.
So I think that's a bit about, now it's the chemistry, so maybe it's worth getting the refractometer thingy that he's talking about, because it's about, like anything, the more fragile the ingredients, so tweaking your recipe a bit maybe too, so that way you're balancing that sugar and getting as much the carbonation out, the things that are volatile. You want to cook them to a point that takes out all the volatile ingredients, and then maybe add other things to stabilize it as well. So if talking with your chefs, you can always add citric acid and different things that could stabilize it, so really working on the chemistry of those syrups to give them a longer life.
No, I mean, I completely agree, and it's, again, we could do another seminar on stabilizing syrups. But it depends how you make the syrup, and it is going to have a shorter shelf life than just sugar and water, because beer does go bad, it does oxidize, the flavors do change. But the higher the sugar content, the more stable it's going to be. And as Lynnette said, if you're cooking it, it's going to be a bit more stable than if you're not. And I've actually played with both making like fresh beer syrups that are not cooked. I just stir for a really long time to remove the carbonation, and then add sugar, and those definitely have a shorter shelf life. Okay. But then my answer to that is make less. I mean, how much are you gonna? How many cocktails do you make? You're like, oh, I made a liter of beer syrup and I'm throwing it away. Well, next time I'm going to make half a liter, or I'm going to make a quarter of a liter.
Fair enough. Good. Any other questions? We're good? Well, awesome. I think that is the wrap-up of our beer seminar. I want to say thank you to all the CAPs for all the great work, and the folks here at Tales. Thanks again to my team at Beer House and Goose Island for sponsoring this seminar, and also my esteemed panel for all your amazing insights to beer cocktails. I learned a lot, so thank you.
And thank you guys for listening to at least 2 people that don't shut the fuck up.
Yeah, please don't take your headsets with you. Leave those for the team. Also, please take your brochures with you. And also, we have the lovely team in the back has great Goose Island gift bags for all of you to take with you on your way out. So enjoy. Thank you all. I thought that was awesome.
It's great. No, it's really good. I think actually, again, it's
I'm the only
gives
one
us
to finish
plenty
all my
to-
cocktails.